think this is appropriate to start because that's what the waterfront looked like a couple of years ago. And really just to start with a quote by Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it's done. Now we're not done, but I think like all of us in this room, we're just on a journey. And sometimes that journey never ends because you get to the destination and then you say, well, where to next? So, you know, we need to start somewhere. But to put into context, the waterfront, 123 hectares, some 16,500 people work here every day. We've recently done an economic impact study on the waterfront to see what an impact it has on the Western Cape. And that's direct jobs. Indirect jobs in the waterfront is around 45,000 jobs. So it has a big footprint. 450 stores, 80 restaurants, 10 hotels, and then obviously a whole lot of range of offices and retail. We have in excess of 24 million visitors a year that come through the waterfront. And so just a little bit of a context that people can see what it's about. But also the waterfront really starts here as you come in, used to be called Kunststadler, I forget the new name now, intersection here where the CTICC is, and it continues. This is the entire waterfront, this area over here, and includes the waterways, the jetties, and we manage it in terms of roads, street lights, waterways, everything. So that's the shopping center, but it includes everything. Total of 400,000 square meters in terms of bulk that's developed. We still have 200,000 square meters to develop. You say where? There's quite a large parcel of land which we're developing over here at the moment. Here at the canal site, here next to the BP building is a site. Obviously, there's a large section in Grange Bay that we can develop, and then we can extend the shopping centre a little bit more as well. So still 200,000 square meters of bulk that we can develop at the waterfront. So in terms of the energy efficiency projects, and I think you know, sometimes I wonder because people say it costs you more to go green, but I think just good design actually addresses a lot of these issues. But obviously we've got a lot of existing buildings which we need to address. But if you do good design, then at least you're addressing a lot of those issues already. So I'll take you through some of them, which is really the energy efficiency projects that we've undertaken. But I think what's important is to highlight that during this entire process, it has had not a negative impact on our turnover or site presentation. Because very often people have this view that you're going to affect the overall sales or how the site presents. To the contrary, our foot traffic has increased. Now I know we've done a lot of other things around the waterfront, but we haven't had any complaints about lighting levels or anything like that in the waterfront. There's a little bit of a resistance from retail management in the beginning to say you're switching off some of the lights during the day, because if you recall in 2008-9, if you had the lights on in your mall during the day, you'd be in the front page of Cape Times. So when we started switching off, a lot of resistance to say turnover is going to come down, and we said, well, prove it to us. Show us those stats that if the lights are switched off during the day, with the amount of natural light that we've got with skylights, that the turnover will come down. And we just haven't had that information. Contrary, our turnover has continuously to grow. Year on year, since last year, it grew by over 15%. So there's none of that can substantiate those sort of arguments. We focus a lot on lighting controls because I think some buildings were built, but it's like in your house. If you have a switch in the room and you just switch it on and off, then at least you're controlling your electricity. You don't always need to have this elaborate lighting control system, but at least if you can control it. We focused a lot on energy efficiency, lighting, and I'll show you that technology that was available 5 years ago compared to today has helped us to actually retrofit some of the lights that we changed 5 years ago already. Obviously on the air conditioning side, because lighting and air conditioning make up probably about 70% of the building's electricity and water. Air conditioning was probably about 40 to 50%, and lighting 17, 20%. So we set focus on those areas, and then we can control the consumption. We also installed new chillers, and I'll take you through it with higher coefficient of performance. And we've done variable speed drives, a whole lot of other intervention in terms of air conditioning, which I'll show you in a moment. And then installation of meters, and I think that's important because very often people develop the buildings, but they have 1 meter and that's the incoming meter. Or they have the meter per floor and say, now we apportion it. But I'll show you in a moment how important that is. And then benchmarked and identified areas that are requiring attention, because instead of the sort of shotgun approach to try and say, let's do everything, sort of like trying to approach and say, what do we do first, and then get the, and then address that. What we've also done, all of our staff, in terms of all the staff that work for me, it's all in their performance contracts. So they perform, meet their targets, and it helps them in their back pocket. And it's amazing how the sort of behavior has changed. And then also when we started with energy efficiency, it obviously was, how do we prevent ourselves from being load shed? Because you may recall that in 2008, when everyone was being shed, Eskom said, well, if you can save 10% of electricity, you won't be shed. So we looked at it from the waterfront and said, well, that was our first target, not to be shed, and you don't want to go through a load shedding exercise, because the calculation that we also done was to buy generators to supply the entire site with generators was going to cost us in excess of 300 million. So if we just spend 10% of that on energy efficiency measures, then we obviously don't need to buy all these generators that we need to maintain. But we started on electricity, and as we started, it just progressed. We said, what next and what next? And then we established a sustainability committee, and now we look at water, we look at waste, we look at everything else. And that's just following a simple business case. We haven't done anything just because we feel it's a good PR exercise. We've done it from a business case to say, what's the payback period, and how's it going to improve our operating expenses. Okay, in terms of metering, a couple of years ago we had meters, but we didn't have ever. We've most probably spent in excess of about R1 million just on additional meters. And I think that if you've got a credible metering system, you can actually meter and you can see what is where. And that was important, especially obviously when we were working with tenants, when we were working with also in the common areas, where do we put these meters? And then also something that we focused on was direct billing, and not billing per square meter. In a lot of office blocks, you'll get a billing, say 1,000 square meters, there's 10 tenants, and how do we apportion that? There might be someone with a call center and someone next door with a small. How do we apportion this fairly? So we believe in direct billing, directly from waste, water, electricity, because it's amazing how behavior changes when you're being directly billed for your consumption. But if I'm only a portion of everything else, my behavior will stay the same and I'll continue to waste. So there's a big drive, and we insist on all of our buildings that go up now to have sub-metering as far as cooling towers, toilets, and we meter as much as possible. And then also provide the necessary information to people that is consuming this. We've had the argument with people where they say we don't believe it, and we've got to then be able to provide that information so that they can then see. Because a lot of the tenants, they'll just blame us, and then in some cases it might be a faulty meter. But in other cases, how can we prove to them that they need to address it? And then, like I've said earlier, a lot of trending and benchmarking that we do. We've got a utilities analyst that we employ, and his sole role is to make sure that the utilities are right. Give you an example, our electricity bill a year is around 50 million. So in terms of billing that we get billed, plus what we need to recover, you're looking at close to 100 million. So we need to get it right, otherwise there's big losses for us. So it's a big focus. But the moment we can trend, and obviously what we try and do is not only trend in terms of our own buildings, we try and talk to other people in terms of, obviously Growth Point is a big shareholder of ours, so we talk to them in terms of their portfolio. We talk to other industry players, because in some cases, you don't need to compete. It's not, you don't need to compete in terms of what you're doing around energy efficiency. It's like, how do we not compete on trying to address crime in the country? You know, we try and work together in different areas.